welcome to Good Game, the show for gamers, by gamers. I'm Bajo.
And I'm Junglist. This week we came, we saw, we kicked its ass.
That's right, we prove once again that we ain't afraid of no ghost.
Hey, Ghostbusters the video game. Then we'll swing into our review of a retro reimagining of an 8-bit classic. The new Bionic Commando game has a strong pedigree, but does it grab us?
Meanwhile, Ray delves into the world of the casual game and finds out exactly who in Australia is making these bite-sized nuggets of gaming goodness.
Then we'll take a look at some games that you were never meant to play in backwards compatible. But first, can you guess the game for this week?
Can you guess it? The game for this week.
Can you guess the game for this week?
When there's news to read and it don't look good, who are you gonna call? I'll just carry the news.
Good game.
Big news this week for motorsports fans with the announcement that Electronic Arts has assigned one of the world's leading racing game developers, Criterion Studios, to make a new game in the Need for Speed franchise. Criterion, the creators of the Burnout series, were revealed to be working on a new Need for Speed game at an investors conference in the past week. While the exact details of which Need for Speed game Criterion is working on has not been revealed, it's rumored to be Need for Speed World Online, a massively multiplayer racing game that would suit Criterion's experience in the multiplayer online racing game genre. Good Game reported a few weeks ago that Ghostbusters the video game would be a Sony exclusive in Australia and Europe, while it would be a multi-platform release in the rest of the world. However, this week it has been revealed that the North American Xbox 360 version of the game will be region-free, allowing import-savvy Australian consumers to obtain the game in a timely fashion. Good Game contacted Atari Australia and they confirmed that the game will not be region-locked, but they were also adamant that the game would receive a local multi-platform release before the end of the year. And there's more ghost-busting action later in the show.
The retro classic Bionic Commando is being brought into 3D, and when a company announces they're remaking one of your favorite retro games, it's hard not to get nostalgic and excited, especially when that company is Capcom, who brought us the brilliant Pac-Man Championship Edition and the fantastic remake Galaga Legions.
Bionic Commando was a very different platformer for its day, using your arm to swing to the right height to kill baddies, and the recent remake was good enough, but they didn't want to stop there.
Set after the events of the previous games, society has shunned anyone with a robotic implant, and the refugees have started attacking America. But you'll be fighting on the side that hates you, a fact that is only explained with this scene.
I'm just a man, Spencer. I can't give you the last 5 years back, but I can give you this. I can help you find her. The clock is ticking on this, Spencer. Are you in or out?
A few of those empty attempts at emotion are made, but this game has no story. Sadly, the use of a few curse words will still label it a mature game.
Having a giant metal arm can be bad for you in some situations, other than the obvious scoliosis. You can't swim, and you're also vulnerable to radiation, which the game uses to lock off sections of the map.
Using the current gen cliched filters and bloom, it looks alright, and as you might expect, it plays out a bit like a Spider-Man game, using your tentacle to throw heavy objects at enemies and swing around each level.
They've imposed a lot of their own rules on the swinging mechanics, such as an icon that comes up telling you when to release. But if you release too late, you smash into this invisible wall, and it's completely counterintuitive and really harsh, Jung.
And your latch points aren't spaced out very well, so when you do get a good swing, you'll sail right past your latch point with nothing to grab onto. This actually discourages chain swinging because you have to plan your next swing a little too much, and you feel like you're being punished for doing well.
Combat suffers from this as well. With multiple human enemies on screen, you need some sort of fluidity to the combat, and it's just not there. You can't chain together the moves, and you can't really do any combos. Also, there's no auto-aim, so a lot of the time you just try and grab an enemy and you'll just end up grabbing the ground.
Because the arm frustrates you, you just end up killing him with your pistol as much as possible. And in this way, the developers made the most boring way to win the best way to win. A little further in and you're presented with biomechs, which are a lot more fun to take out than humans because you don't have to be fluid. You just avoid their shots and hit that obvious red spot on their back. It's not as though the game gets better as it goes along though, because the boss fights are pretty lame too, such as the level full of helicopters where at the end you get to fight the bigger helicopter. Ooh.
Most of the fun I had, Jung, was jumping off those buildings and just crushing whatever was underneath.
Whoa, nice move. I wouldn't want to be caught in that shockwave.
And some of the sniping was okay, but Jung, most of my nostalgia was wiped away by just a wave of all-around bad. I'm giving it 5 out of 10. What about you?
It's what constitutes a movie game without the movie. Having said that, Spider-Man, the movie game, did everything better than this game. Yeah, I hated it, man. I'm giving it 3 out of 10 rubber chickens, and I'm sending this franchise back to the second dimension.
Good game.
Games get cancelled all the time. One moment they're an anticipated release with untold potential, and the next moment they've disappeared and we never see or hear from them again. Usually, that is. Of course, there are exceptions, whether it's through a calculated leak onto the interwebs or an accidental one. There are quite a few games that you can play right now that were never meant to see the light of day. Take this, for example.
Hi, I'm Penn Jillette, and this is my partner, Teller. Welcome to our video game.
The illusionist and comedian duo Penn and Teller have always been known for their practical jokes, and their first and only video game, titled Smoke and Mirrors, was no exception. It was a compilation of minigame pranks that you could use to make fools of your friends, including a shooting game where you could make your opponent lose every single round. There were computer clairvoyants that would use phony astrology to trick your friends. There was even a side-scrolling action game where you played Penn and Teller as they tried to debunk a fraudulent illusionist stage show with a guest appearance from legendary rocker Lou Reed.
This is the impossible level, boys. Impossible doesn't mean very difficult. Very difficult is winning the Nobel Prize. Impossible is eating the sun.
But the most notorious of all these mini-games was called Desert Bus.
Teller and I want to prepare you for the real world. We want to show you what life is really like. Desert Bus is the first in our line of what we like to call Vera simulators, games stupefyingly like reality.
As a coach line driver, you had to drive a bus from Tucson to Las Vegas through the arid American desert in real time and with a maximum speed limit of 45 miles per hour. The whole trip took about 8 thrilling hours of gameplay with no breaks, after which you'd have to do it all over again for the return journey. Sadly, the game's developer, Absolute Entertainment, went absolutely out of business before they could release the game in 1995. But due to the sneaky leak of a final version of the game, it's still possible to play Smoke and Mirrors today, although we're still not sure if that's a good thing.
Nah.
Not as bizarre, but just as cool was this.
Hi there! I'm your DJ for the tournament, Greg Irwin. You all having fun yet? Enjoy the pleasant background music.
Propeller Arena was one of the last games that Sega were working on for the Dreamcast console back in 2001. It was a competitive airborne shoot-'em-up, where players piloted World War II-era planes as they tried to gun each other out of the skies. However, the whole game was grounded in the aftermath of the September 11 terrorist attacks. Apparently, Sega were particularly concerned that a game that rewarded you for causing mayhem in the skies would not be received well in a post-9/11 world, and decided to hangar the game indefinitely. After some time spent in obscurity, Propeller Arena was of course leaked. A complete version of the game somehow made its way out of Sega headquarters, after which it could finally be played as its creators intended, a brilliant air combat game with dogfighting action. In 1992, a company called Active Enterprises totally plagiarized the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles to create a game called Cheetah Men 2, a side-scrolling martial arts game featuring a clan of half-man, half-beast, black-belted abominations. Make no mistake though, this game did not have black belt gameplay. Cheetah Men 2 was riddled to its core with crippling bugs, ugly glitches, and the kind of half-finished game design that completely explains why it was never released, and why its developer went out of business well before the game came out. For some strange reason though, the same can't be said about its soundtrack, which was so good you could breakdance to it. Since the game has been leaked and rediscovered, the Cheetah Men 2 theme song has proved so popular with disc-jockeying internet geeks that the feline trio have been immortalized in several beat-pumping remixes. But it's not just small and quirky games that get cancelled on the eve of their completion. In fact, even some of the biggest games in the world get the boot. Star Fox 2, or Star Wing 2 as it would have been called in Australia, was supposed to be a direct sequel to Nintendo's original space shooting masterpiece. The game was planned to be released in 1995, but Nintendo had second thoughts. By that stage, Ninty were already hard at work on their Nintendo 64 console, and they decided that releasing Star Wing 2 for the SNES would have taken too much attention away from their newest baby, so they canned it. Years down the track and a few leaked prototypes of the game later, and we finally got to see what we were missing out on. And it was pretty awesome. Star Wing 2 included several new characters, a map screen that gave you the freedom to plot your own path through the galaxy, and not only that, but it did away with the previous Star Wing game's linear level design and turned it into a more free-flying dogfight. Despite it being cancelled, ideas from Star Wing 2 did eventually make their way into other games in the series, including Lylat Wars for the N64. Just another game that proves if you want to keep a good game down, you'd better lock up the master discs and throw away the key.
Good game.
Terrible news for WaggleMax is great news for you, the consumer. That's right, our laboratories are going into liquidation, so now's the perfect opportunity to snaffle yourself a bargain. Analysts said that the Videotronic game and black market research industries were Great Depression-proof. Lucky for great value, they were wrong. Pick up prehensile pincers for a penny. Get a prestigiously powered power-up on a pauper's paycheck. A savvy save point for a song. Why, even these fine office furnishings are going cheap. Or if you're feeling adventurous, why not sample an unfinished prototype from the R&D department? Finally, we leave you with this message from WaggleMax founder and case 32455 defendant, P. Terry Waghorn.
Fine WaggleMax customers. You think this is the end? You cannot stop our dark army. Smite me down and another will rise. This is my blood oath to you all.
WaggleMax Technologies. Dear God, how will I feed my family now?
Good game.
Trials 2 is a motorcycle game in 3D, but on a 2D plane, and the object of the game is to work your way through a set of physics puzzles.
Hang on. Let's do something different. How about a haiku review?
Why?
All the cool kids are doing it.
I want to be cool.
Then it's settled. Motorcycle Man. Looks 3D on 2D plane. Lots of obstacles.
Limited controls, only which way you lean, and acceleration.
Forgiving checkpoints. Instant restarts are key to addictive gameplay.
A casual game. Available on PC, based on a Flash game.
Easy at first, but pretty challenging later. 8 rubber chickens.
Couldn't put it down. At its best with crazy tricks. 8 from me as well.
Good game.
Casual games. They're fun, they're simple, they're easy to pick up and play, and they're actually being made right here on our doorstep.
Ray caught up with some of Australia's best casual and flash game developers to find more about the casual game explosion and how they're getting an entirely new generation into gaming.
They're fun, they're easy to play, and now they're everywhere. A few years ago, it seemed unlikely that Flash and casual games would be able to compete with the AAA titles, but with more than 200 million people playing them worldwide and industry revenues in excess of $2.25 billion, clearly they're hard to ignore. So, who in Australia is making these little gaming gems? Colin Cardwell is the CEO of Third Sense Australia, one of the most prolific casual games developers in the country. They recently released the 4th installment of their popular Swords and Sandals series and run their own gaming portal, Fizzy, which hosts hundreds of casual games.
I was wondering if you could give me a crash course in casual games.
Sure.
Casual games started emerging about 6 or 7 years ago. I think when people started finding that they didn't have time for some of the bigger games, and developers started to recognise that and created much smaller, easier to learn games, and certainly the internet's had a big impact in the distribution of casual games. And so we've seen this really something that started out very small with 1- and 2-man bands developing tiny games, often in Flash, grow and grow over the last 6 or 7 years until we now have a whole industry.
What do you think are some of the key casual games from the last few years?
There's probably 2 that have been incredibly successful and known by everybody and almost dismissed. When Microsoft put Solitaire on Windows, they had no idea, I think, of how popular and how played that game would become. And it's probably still the most played casual game of all time. When Nintendo included Tetris with the original Game Boy, again, they had no idea how popular that game would become. Bejeweled is always held up as one of the most popular puzzle games. And then more recently, we've seen a whole range of games have really taken off.
Jared Woods, also known as Farbs, recently left what for many would be a dream job at a major game studio in Canberra to pursue making casual games. His resignation, though, would make most gamers proud. So what is it about casual games that won him over?
I would have been, I don't know, maybe about 8 years old when I was playing a game on a Commodore 64, and I loved playing games on this thing. And I looked at the title screen and I saw, it was by so-and-so. I thought, someone made that. I've got to do this. This is what I want to do. So I got a job in games, and I worked in a studio, and then I worked in another studio, and I worked on some, pretty big projects. And what I found was that big projects are really, really different to the little sort of single-person, crazy idea Commodore 64 game that I was excited about at the start. So what I'm trying to do is, by working by myself, I want to try and make that kind of game where you just come up with a ridiculous idea and see whether or not you can come up with a game experience that people haven't played before that's fun and exciting.
So can you tell me the difference between working on a AAA title and working on a small casual game?
If you work in a large developer or in a large studio, you're going to have, I don't know, between 30 and 500, was it 450 for Assassin's Creed now, I think I read? People all working on the same game. And so, one of 450 people isn't going to get to make much of an impact on how the game plays. They're going to probably work on modeling a cart that sits somewhere in the background that nobody ever actually looks at. One of the things you get as an independent developer is because you have a much smaller project, you're taking a much smaller financial risk, you can take much greater creative risk.
We tend to work with far less documentation that you would have in big video games. We tend to prototype and try things and see what people feel about them. And if it's fun, we develop it further. The swine flu game is really about helping Mexico get rid of its pigs by throwing them into the USA. This was a game that we developed a couple of weeks ago in response to the swine flu pandemic, and really it was an opportunity to really have a bit of fun with the media. That game was really put together in only a few days. And that's one of the great advantages of Flash. You can develop very, very quickly and get a game out there. And that one, very luckily, got picked up by a few people and became very popular.
How do casual game developers make money?
That's a good question. A lot of them don't. There are a lot of people who, they just spend their spare time making little freeware games that they think are fun and exciting, and that's enough for them. Other people jump onto the downloadable services that we've all been seeing showing up lately, so XBLA, PSN, WiiWare, DSiWare, Steam, etc., etc., etc. Those all provide a really good opportunity to make a small game that people can kind of see, buy for $10, and that's really enough for a lot of indie developers to really do quite well. Because, when you think about it, a large developer's got to feed 500 people with the success of their game. If an indie developer's 2 people, then they don't need to sell much at all. I worked on a game called Fishy Fishy, which was originally sort of aimed at the casual space. I ended up developing that as a freeware title for PC. I'd originally intended to sell it, but by the end of it, I thought, it'd just be fun to give it to people. And what's great about what happened with that is I ended up finding a person who was really excited about doing a WiiWare version. So now I've made a free game and released it, and yet I've made some money out of it. So it can work.
So what do you think the future looks like for casual games?
It's going to grow, it's going to become more prolific. And one of the things we absolutely know is, although we talk about casual games as being popular with everybody, casual games are also very popular with gamers. Gamers will, of course, sit down for hours and hours and hours and play big games, but on their phone or when they're at work, or they only have a short period of time, they dip into websites and they play casual games prolifically. And so I think the future is looking incredibly rosy.
Good game! If there was one movie from the 80s that deserves a good video game, it's Ghostbusters. Fans have been screaming for a third movie, but they'll have to make do with the video game, which is exclusive to PS3 for now and coming out on other platforms later in the year.
You play as a rookie who looks terrified all of the time, and teaming up with the original Ghostbusters, all voiced by the original cast, you set about your slime-filled career chasing Slimer to the original point of his manifestation.
A strange exhibit in the Metro History Museum has caused some unrest amongst the ghosts, and everything seems to be pointing to Gozer. The story was written by Dan Aykroyd and Harold Ramis, who also wrote the movies, and it's chock full of nostalgia.
Egon, how close do we have to get the big trap to reel him in?
A lot closer than this.
Many of the enemies you fight early on are familiar, and everything from the burn marks on the walls to the excellent banter are spot on.
Mr. Mayor, an enormous event is on the horizon.
Something at the museum exhibit triggered a systemized psychic occurrence. Some mechanism we don't know the nature of yet.
No, of course you don't.
One thing the game does really well is give you a backstory to whom you're fighting in the lead up to the fight.
Yeah, Jung, that was a really nice touch. And when that classic music kicks in, I hate to sound like a cliche, but you really feel like you're reliving the film in a whole new way.
How was it? Was it cool? What did it look like? Did you get any samples? Did it have multiple eyes?
Shut up.
It's also quite clever how they've linked in the new storyline and new enemies while also letting fans fight those fantastic battles and moments from the film.
I absolutely loved reliving these battles, Jung. The Grey Lady in the library, fighting Slimer in the hotel, and Stay Puft, it's all just awesome.
It's the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man.
The cast also never stopped talking. There's a constant stream of dialogue.
Wow, big spikes. Hey, Cadet, you need to see this.
Stand back. Look out! There they go!
Double full torso animators!
And they get that mix right of action, horror, and comedy. There's just so much for the fans here, Jung, and it's a great game as well.
To capture a ghost, you need to zap him and trap him. Once a ghost is weakened, you can engage your capture stream and wrangle him into submission before eventually sucking him down in a spectacular light show.
And this is by far the most fun way to fight, and it's really satisfying when you finally trap them. Some enemies require you to freeze them and then smash through them. Others just need a good sliming, while some you just need to smash into the wall.
Grab them and slam them, noob!
Often you'll need to switch weapons and tactics mid-battle, and some of the mini-bosses are really fun and often require you to rip off a part of their body with the capture stream before you can take them down. As you progress, you'll be purchasing new upgrades and also be given new weapons to test.
This was the biggest concern for me, Badge. How will they keep the weapons interesting? And they do a reasonable job, but the variety is in the enemies. Often they'll use environmental objects to fight you, and as you can see, there's heaps of destruction you can cause, all of which you'll charge to the city, of course.
You'll be spending a lot of your time looking up, which is fine because the levels are detailed and inspired. Your teammate AI is generally pretty good. They'll look after you and give you direction and keep you entertained. Blue sparks will fly out of your teammates' backpacks when they're down, which makes it very easy to find them in the midst of battle, which, as you can see, gets quite hectic.
There are a few physics puzzles here and there which are solved using your slime tether. Shooting it in two places allows you to pull two objects together. There's nothing too brain straining. In fact, the hardest ones are where you don't realize what parts of the world you can interact with.
The game has multiplayer, which is ridiculously exciting for a fanboy like myself. We weren't able to test it out with our offline code, but we're told it's a series of maps where you compete for cash. Other than that, there's not really much else to say about the game, Jung. It's a bit short. It was over before I finished eating my delicious sandwich. About 7 hours tops, but it's totally for the fans, and it's a great game. I'm giving it 8.5 out of 10 rubber chickens.
In the game extras, Dan Aykroyd says that this is the third Ghostbusters movie, and you can tell that a lot of love has gone into the script and art design. It just wouldn't be the same game without the original cast, and our only real complaint is that it's short. I'm giving 8 out of 10 rubber chickens.
Ah! It's the ghost from Peanuts Past! Quick, get the Wii Zapper!
Oh, I can't use it, it's too stupid. Get the GameCube.
Good game.
So did you guess the game for this week?
It was called Haunting, made by Electronic Arts all the way back in 1993. You played as the star of the game, a mischievous ghost named Polterguy, whose quest in the afterlife was to scare a family of obnoxious snobs into vacating their haunted house.
As Polterguy, you could possess a variety of everyday household objects and cause them to manifest some frightening hallucinations that'll drive your unwanted house guests screaming from the premises. But should you fail in your quest, you'll be busted back down to the underworld from whence you came.
Junglist, what are we busting out for next week's show?
We'll be hitting the old dusty trail with Fuel, an open-world racer which has received a Guinness record for having the largest virtual world ever. We find out if size really matters. We'll be absorbing the powers of Prototype, a gene-splicing, shape-shifting action game set in the sprawling metropolis of a future New York City.
Plus, we meet up with some of the most accomplished and knowledgeable storytellers in the games industry and find out what goes into telling a good story and how that affects a great game.
Don't forget to troll our forums, which feature the best bait and banter this side of the internet. Whoever can write the best gaming review haiku gets a free Good Game t-shirt.
Until next week, gamers.
Where are you going? I thought we weren't afraid of no ghosts. Wait, that's a double negative. We are afraid of ghosts. Ah! So did you guess the game for this week?
It was called... Sorry.
Great game.